Owning property can be so great for business owners, but of course, if you do it correctly, let's talk about one of those ways, and that's going to be the Augusta Rule. If you're new here, my name is Javaris. I'm a CPA licensed in the state of Georgia, and I just want to tell y'all about the Augusta Rule today. The Augusta Rule basically comes from code section 280AG. It says that you get to rent out your personal residence for up to 14 days, and you do not have to include that income into your total gross income when you're doing your taxes. And a fun fact, this Augusta Rule actually came from Augusta, Georgia, but something interesting is, although yes, you can rent it out to third parties, you can also rent out your home to your own business. So this is great because you get double tax advantages. You don't have to report income, but you still get to take the deduction. You can't beat that. Now remember, at the beginning I said owning real estate can be a great and powerful tool for a business owner when done correctly. And one way to make sure you're doing it correctly is to ensure your documentation is up to par. Especially if you are using the strategy where you are renting out your business to yourself, you definitely want to make sure you're doing it correctly because that's technically an internal or intercompany transaction. So let me give a practical example before I get too far into the restrictions. So let's just say I wanted to rent my home out to my business for a content day, like how I'm doing right now. I'm filming a lot of videos. So let's just say for the entire day, I'm going to charge my business $200 to rent out my home. And let's just say I do this 14 days out the year because I have the right to do so. 200 times 14 is $2,800. So that means that I have $2,800 that I can write off as business deductions on my tax return, but I don't have to include $2,800 as income to myself. The moment I decide to rent out my home for that 15th day, the Augusta Rule is no longer valid and all of my rental income would then become taxable. Another huge thing that gets a lot of people audited is they come up with a price that is completely unreasonable and is not fair market value. So let's go back to my example from earlier. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and I can find many sources that can correlate and understand that $200 for renting out a studio for filming or editing or taking pictures is definitely a reasonable and fair market price. Many studio rental places are anywhere between $100 and $400 to rent out. Now, had I said $1,000 to rent out, that might be a lot more difficult to argue if I were to get audited. Remember, it's not just about coming up with a random price that you would charge. You want to look in your city or state and see if you can find reasonable things to show that this is a fair market price. And it's also important to understand what it is that you're renting out your home for. So if you're saying you're renting it out for a meeting, then you probably not want to look at studio prices. You might want to look at what it would cost to rent out a boardroom or a conference room. In emphasis, you're looking in your state or city. Which leads me back into my point about documentation. I do think the Augusta Rule is a great, strong strategy, but you have to make sure you're doing it correctly. If you're deciding you want to use your home for a meeting, it's important that you document everything. Document who's supposed to be there, what date, and it needs to be some type of transaction where we're seeing the money go from one bank account to another. How are you going to say you paid yourself for renting out your home when we don't see any transactions between yourself and the business? There's no invoice, there's no contract, there's no engagement letter. It's very hard to argue that if we don't have those documentation. But this is just a very introductory understanding of what the Augusta Rule is and how it can benefit you as a business owner who owns property. Hope this helped. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to leave them in the comments below and stay tuned for other videos. Peace.